Good evening. If only the classes here came to order that quickly. My name is Bo Dudley. I am the class of 1974-79 Law, and it's my great privilege to be the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs at Washington & Lee. And on behalf of everyone here, a very warm welcome home to all of you. This is, of course, the opening assembly of Alumni Weekend, so we are officially underway. Before we move to the program, I want to take a brief moment to pay a short tribute. In the last year, we have lost an unusually high number of giants on whose shoulders we stand. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor their countless and lasting contributions. Former English professor Sidney Cowling, former professor of journalism ethics Lou Hodges, former special assistant to 3 Washington & Lee presidents Frank Parsons, Washington & Lee president 1968 to 1983 Robert E.R. Huntley, former history professor Bill Jenks, and former university treasurer and founding curator of the Reeves Center Jim Whitehead. Thank you. They will not be forgotten, obviously. This is a signature event here at Washington & Lee. We are so blessed with alumni who care deeply about this place, and we are always glad to welcome you back to campus. We've planned a busy, fun, and stimulating weekend for you. We are grateful you are here, and since you've returned to your academic roots, let's have a short quiz. Are we going to let a few passing showers or gray skies dampen our spirits this weekend? Thank you, A+. One additional housekeeping note for the great class of 1966 who are here celebrating their 50th reunion. Gentlemen, let's start now. Gentlemen, in your registration packets is a lapel pin which recognizes your brand new status as a 5-star general starting Sunday morning. Congratulations. The good news is that this is not the end of your campus reunion experience. Starting in 2017, you will be invited to the 5-Star Festival each year, and we look forward to seeing you for many, many years to come. By the way, I know that's a little daunting or perhaps upsetting, so here is the good news. As we speak, we are working with the class of 1951 to plan their 65th reunion. So there are many more good experiences ahead for you. Now I want to ask a few special guests to stand. Please hold your applause. Ms. Tara Singer is the Executive Director of Omicron Delta Kappa. Professor Linda Hooks is the Faculty Advisor to the Washington & Lee Circle of ODK, and I'd like all other members of ODK to stand and be recognized. It's now a real treat to introduce senior Washington & Lee student Anna Russell Thornton from Nashville. Anna Russell is majoring in English and politics with a minor in education policy. She came to Washington & Lee as a Johnson Scholar. She was promptly elected to the Student Body Executive Committee and then served as EC Secretary. She has studied abroad at Worcester College at Oxford University. She's a member of Phi Beta Kappa. She was the web chair, the speakers committee consultant, and the stage manager of the 2016 mock convention in February. She serves on the university's courses and degrees committee. She serves as a peer counselor for first-year students and is a member of the Reformed University Fellowship Ministry team. Anna Russell will work as an English teacher and plans to attend graduate school. Now, in her spare time, Anna Russell is the president of the ODK Circle here on our campus, and she will come to the podium and lead the tapping ceremony. Please welcome Anna Russell Thornton.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Dudley, for that kind introduction, and welcome to all of you back to campus. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. Just over 100 years ago, a select group of 15 Washington and Lee student and faculty members founded Omicron Delta Kappa, ODK, to bring together diverse campus leaders for the general good of the institution. Since its founding, the Society has sought to honor those students, faculty, alumni, and community members who best demonstrate exemplary leadership rooted in strong character. As the Alpha Circle of ODK, we continue to emphasize this high caliber of leadership by recognizing those with a deep-seated commitment to continued active participation in the W&L community, strong spiritual and moral character, and service to the campus, the community, and the world. These initiates continue in the tradition of our founders to serve to improve the world around us through honorable, innovative, and moral leadership. I am humbled by both the previous accomplishments and the future potential of the student initiates honored here today. We will also welcome 4 honorary initiates to the Alpha Circle. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the honorary initiates for their unwavering commitment to the ideals of ODK, for their resolute leadership, even in difficult times, and for the legacy that they have created that will guide Washington and Lee students for generations to come. By their induction today into the Alpha Circle, we recognize that our honorary initiates have succeeded in demonstrating true leadership by unifying personal integrity, an inner zeal to understand and transform, and an apparent genius for motivating others to do the same. I look forward to seeing your leadership continue to shape the world around us. Thank you. We will now recognize each of our initiates and invite them to the stage for the traditional tapping ceremony. We will begin today by recognizing our honorary initiates. I will call each to the stage individually, and I ask that you hold your applause until all have been introduced. Theodore John Elistad. Mr. Elistad spent 24 years as the city manager of Lexington, Virginia. Under his leadership, Lexington tackled such issues as upgrading the water system, reorganizing fire and emergency services, and uniting with other local governments for community services. He has served on boards including the Rockbridge Regional Jail, the Rockbridge Regional Emergency Communications Center, the Shenandoah Valley Juvenile Detention Center, the Shenandoah Valley Partnership, and the Community Services Board. Before arriving in Lexington, he worked as the assistant city manager for Fairfax, Virginia, and for Blacksburg, Virginia. In community service, Mr. Elistad has served on the boards of the Rockbridge Area Recreation Organization and Valley Program for the Aging. He is a charter member of the Kendall Retirement Community Board, treasurer of the Miller's House Museum Board, and a member of the Lexington Sunrise Rotary Club. Mr. Elistad has coached youth sports and served as a collegiate swim official. He received a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Wisconsin and a Master's in Urban Affairs from the University of Delaware. Mr. Elistad has 5 children and 4 grandchildren and lives in Lexington. Elizabeth Knapp. Dr. Knapp is a campus and community leader. She received her Bachelor of Science in Geology from Washington and Lee and a PhD in Environmental Sciences from the University of Virginia. She is now a professor of geology at W&L, where she serves as the Associate Provost and Director of the Johnson Program in Leadership and Integrity. She is the chair of the Special Working Group on the History of African Americans at W&L, the University Sustainability Committee, the Community Engagement and Service Learning Advisory Committee, and the co-chair of the University Committee on Inclusiveness and Campus Climate. In the community, Dr. Knapp has been a board member of the Rockbridge SPCA, the Rockbridge County Public Service Authority, the Community Foundation for Rockbridge, Bath, and Allegheny, the VMI Research Labs Board of Directors, and the Nature Camp Foundation. She is a member of the vestry of the R.E. Lee Episcopal Church, and as a student at W&L, Dr. Knapp was active in the Outing Club and in the organization and leadership of the Chi Omega chapter. She and her husband, Chuck Smith, have 2 teenagers, Jenner and Charlie. Anderson Dodd Smith. Dr. Smith, Regents Professor of Psychology Emeritus at Georgia Institute of Technology, is a leader in his field and in higher education. Dr. Smith is a member of WNL's class of 1966, where he received his Bachelor of Arts. He earned his master's and PhD from the University of Virginia. His research interests are in the area of cognitive aging, and he has written or co-edited more than 75 articles and books. Dr. Smith recently retired from the position of Senior Vice Provost of Academic Affairs at Georgia Institute of Technology. Dr. Smith received the Distinguished Alumnus Award in Psychology at the University of Virginia and was made an honorary alumnus of Georgia Tech. The American Psychological Association has recognized him with the Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award and the Award for the Advancement of Psychology. He's been elected a Fellow of the APA, the Association for Psychological Science, and the Gerontological Society. In his community, Dr. Smith has served on the boards of the Northside Shepherds Senior Citizen Center, Meals on Wheels Atlanta, St. Anne's Terrace Retirement Community, and Zoo Atlanta. At Washington and Lee, Dr. Smith was a member of Sigma Phi Epsilon and the Glee Club. He and his wife have 2 daughters and 4 granddaughters. Skylar Rideout. Ms. Rideout is an accomplished illustrator, event planner, and fundraiser. She is a 1991 graduate of Washington and Lee, earning a bachelor's degree in studio art, where her mentors included Professor Pam Simpson and Professor Kathleen Olson. After graduation, Ms. Rideout worked for the National Museum of Women in the Arts and the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. She worked for Turner Broadcasting for 15 years, including head of the event marketing department. Also in Atlanta, she served the Atlanta Humane Society as manager of the fundraising event program for 3 years. In 2010, Ms. Rideout enrolled in the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York to study illustration. After that, she returned to Atlanta, where she established a studio that specializes in watercolors. Her inspiration includes Georgia O'Keeffe, Oscar de la Renta, and the orchids in Atlanta's botanical gardens. In service to her alma mater, Ms. Rideout serves as class agent. As a student, she was a founding member of the WNL chapter of Kappa Kappa Gamma and served as its social chair. She also was involved with several committees for Fancy Dress, Kathacon, and the Student Activity Board. Please join me in congratulating our honorary initiates. We will now recognize our student initiates, all members of the class of 2017. You are encouraged to read about the initiates' many impressive accomplishments in the program. Please hold your applause until all have been recognized on stage. And please also note that some of our initiates are abroad for spring term and cannot join us this evening. Brooke Rose Donnelly. Melina Lauren Kanaba. Harry Rob Lustick. Ashley Kennemer Oakes. Catherine Suzanne Sarfert. Harrison James Westgarth. Please join me in congratulating our student initiates. As they return to their seats, I will move on to the awards portion of our ceremony. I have the pleasure of presenting 2 awards this evening to 2 very deserving recipients. Please hold your applause until the end of each. The Rupert Latour Award recognizes a sophomore with outstanding leadership potential. This year's Rupert Latour Award recipient is Cassie Ann Scott. class of 2019. Ms. Scott is an English major with a minor in poverty and human capability studies. She serves as the head career fellow for career development and works in the community as an SAT tutor for the College Access Program. She is the spokeswoman for the Gender Action Group, a member of Friday Underground, and a leader of Advocates for an Alternative Atmosphere. Ms. Scott is a member of Phi Eta Sigma Honor Society, recipient of the W&L Decade Award, and a winner of the US-UK Fulbright Summer Institute Fellowship and the Woolley Fellowship. She has contributed to campus publications, including the Ringtum Phi and USA Today. She will serve as a peer counselor beginning in fall 2016. Please join me in congratulating our Latour Award winner, Cassie Ann Scott. The James G. Leyburn Award recognizes exemplary service to the campus or community. This year's recipient is the Refugee Working Group. The Refugee Working Group is dedicated to resettling refugee families in Lexington to combat the global refugee crisis. Key leaders of this group include Jerry Ney, Marcy Orr, Sarah Wilson, Marilyn Alexander, Irene Condi, Alexandra Brown, Amy DeHart, Stephanie Richard, Amanda Merrill, Catherine and Joel Roy, Martha Devening, Laura Pearson, and Mohammed Kamara. The group emerged from a committee of R.E. Lee Episcopal Church, but it quickly began to recruit volunteers from 22 different Christian congregations, as well as practitioners of Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, Unitarians, Quakers, and the religiously unaffiliated. Now claiming just under 300 volunteers, the group successfully relocated its first family from the Democratic Republic of the Congo in March. The group coordinated the support of multiple university and community organizations, and community volunteers greeted the family with food, clothing, and toys. The Refugee Working Group has now set its sights on helping at least 2 more refugee families move to Lexington in the near future, with the aim of forging a supportive community atmosphere for these individuals. Please join me in congratulating our Leyburn Award winner, the Refugee Working Group. As they return to their seats, I wish to offer a final congratulation to all our ODK student and honorary initiates. Thank you again for everything you do for Washington and Lee and the greater community. I would also like to add a recognition for those in the audience who are members of ODK, as we did earlier. Thank you. As you may know, the national headquarters is located in the former train station here in Lexington, across from the Linfest Center, and you're welcome to drop by on Friday to tour the headquarters if you'd like. I'll now return the podium to Mr. Dudley to continue our program.
Thank you, Anna Russell. Speaking for many alumni in the audience, you don't remind us of ourselves when we were seniors at Washington and Lee. The phrase "needs no introduction" may have been invented for our keynote speaker, at least on this campus. President Ken Ruscio's impressive bio is in your program. It would suggest to you a man of approximately 85 years old, given his level of activity and accomplishments. I encourage you to read it a little bit later. I'm going to attempt the impossible by trying to capture in a very quick moment what our keynote speaker's 25 years of service have meant to Washington and Lee. President Ruscio now is having a wonderful and active end to his energetic, visionary, and impactful presidency of the last decade. And of course, that decade followed a prior 15 years of service to W&L in a variety of important senior faculty and administrative positions. A university president needs to be wise, compassionate, principled, articulate, strong, and especially good at inspiring broad confidence in the institution. This would be difficult with only one constituency. But of course here, the audience includes, among others, trustees, students, parents, faculty, alumni, both quiet and vocal, donors, accreditation agencies, the local community, and on and on and on. Perhaps the indispensable attribute of a great Washington and Lee president is good old-fashioned judgment, informed by a willingness to listen, to focus not on short-term gains or the moment, but on what is best for Washington and Lee, resulting in a sound and balanced decision while many people are watching and relying on you. To name only a few, our president has led the execution of ambitious, forward-looking strategic plan. He has embraced the need for change in order to remain as strong as we need to be. His balanced and thoughtful handling of issues concerning our unique spring term, building a more inclusive community, our heritage, the law school, and his leadership on the need for more housing on campus stand out as just a few examples of his uncommon good judgment. The successful conclusion of the remarkable campaign for Washington and Lee in June of last year is a powerful affirmation of his leadership, especially when you consider that 85% of the gifts to that $542.5 million came from individual alumni just like him and just like us. We are blessed by a culture of humility here at WNL. We take pride in our work and we try not to boast about this wonderful university too often. But our president would not say it, so let me. Without a doubt, the leadership of your keynote speaker has deeply strengthened this university and secured its future for generations to come. Please welcome our highly respected colleague, friend, and fellow alumnus, your president, Kenneth P. Ruscio, Jr.
Thank you, Bo. I didn't quite deserve that, but thank you very much for it anyway. And my congratulations first to all the ODK recipients and the award recipients. ODK was founded here 102 years ago, so it's not just the reception of an ODK distinction. It's receiving a WNL ODK distinction, and we are very, very proud of you. I add my welcome to Bo's to all of you this weekend. It is good to have you back home. I hope you enjoy your time here. Not so much that we need to alert the Lexington police, but enough that you renew friendships and along the way find a few precious moments of solitude to reflect upon the impact this institution has had on your life, a privilege that is mine every day. The temptation for me this evening is to sum up everything I've learned about our alma mater after actually 31 years as a student, faculty member, administrator, and president. The arc of my WNL career starts in Gillum Dorm as a freshman, stretches to Davis as a junior dorm counselor, then to Graham Lee's as a senior dorm counselor. It eventually dead-ended in Lee House, which is a rather limited and somewhat unadventurous trek of about 50 yards, but it did lead to a better parking space. As my time as president winds down, it is indeed tempting to take one last shot at capturing the character of Washington and Lee and this timeless trust that it seems to instill in all of us. But I'm constrained by the inconvenient coincidence of this being my 40th reunion. A fair number of my classmates are here. There is nothing more humbling than being around those who knew you when. I imagine the finest legal minds of the class of 1966, who are here for their 50th reunion, have crafted a strict contract governing the classmates' interactions this weekend, a version of which I strongly encourage the class of '76 to adopt. The one that goes, "I won't tell if you don't." This is a weekend for eavesdropping on whispered conversations. Listen carefully, as I have done in the past, and you will overhear mystified alumni trying to make sense of things that will never make sense. For example, he's now a renowned cardiologist, but wasn't he a beta? He's an investment analyst, but he was so mathematically challenged as a student, he couldn't even correctly number the footnotes on his English paper. She married him. And my favorite, didn't he barely get admitted here, and now he's the president? My point is that any attempt on my part to draw grandiose conclusions about what this place is, what it stands for, what its values are, what it means in today's world, why in the midst of sameness and soullessness in higher education, our alma mater retains a level of distinctiveness and quality, and perhaps most of all, why it matters. Any such ambition is likely to get quashed by those who know how to keep you humble. But maybe I'll stick my toe in the water a little bit. I wouldn't survive a day as president without the early morning walk through campus, a ritual that passes for exercise but is really to clear the mind. Those of us who work here take for granted the setting in which we find ourselves. This is a historic campus in a location unusually blessed by nature. We are in the Shenandoah Valley, surrounded by the Blue Ridge and Allegheny Mountains, not far from a place where a river cuts through those mountains to form Goshen Pass. We work in buildings of architectural grace and strength, which reflects so perfectly the qualities of grace and strength that define this community. Each morning, as I see the custodians and facilities management crews prepare the campus for the classes, athletic events, concerts, and performances that will stretch well into the evening, I am deeply aware how fortunate I am to have spent most of my career here. I would caution us against the feeling, the hubris really, that as alumni we enjoy an exclusively privileged stake in protecting this university. We share it with those who may not hold a degree from W&L, but have dedicated their careers to it. There are folks like Randolph Hare, who came here in the facilities area about the time I came as a freshman. He's never left. Much of the beauty of this campus has his fingerprints on it. When commencement and convocations and reunions come along, and chairs and platforms and tents have to be erected and then removed, there's Randolph, you'll see him this weekend, supervising the operations quietly and effectively, and working with dozens of others equally devoted to this university. Or the professors I work with every day, folks like Bob Strong, Angie Smith, Art Goldsmith, Jonathan Eastwood, Carla Murdoch, and Bill Connolly, among many others. Even as they forge their own paths, they follow in the footsteps of such icons as Sid Cowling, Bill Jenks, Ed Spencer, Len Gerard, and Buck Buchanan, and the legendary and now sadly gone Pam Simpson, the art professor who a few years ago gave an opening convocation speech just a month before she passed away, in which she explained how our physical surroundings both shape and are shaped by our character. When we conclude our business here this evening and exit the chapel, keep her words in mind as you glance up at the historic colonnade. What we value today, she said, came together over a period of several hundred years, each generation built on the past. What resulted was not only a collection of historic, distinguished buildings, which we are now working so hard to restore, we ended up with a symbol. This is who we are. When we think of our most deeply held values, academic excellence, collegiality, civility, and most of all, honor, all of them are embodied here. White columns, worn steps, halls hallowed by time, and the strength embodied within them. I often find large meaning in small places here. Woods Creek winds through the ravine spanned by the world's longest non-suspended cement footbridge. The creek originates just a short distance from our campus over by the Lexington Golf Course. It picks up force just before it hits the area near the Lenfest Center. It then flows boldly through the space between the Woods Creek apartments and the Leyburn Library, following the worn trailbed where, until the early 1960s, iron rails once served the trains that came into Lexington. The creek continues behind VMI before it empties into the Maury River, which then empties into the James River. The James, in turn, goes past Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, past Jamestown, home of the first English settlers, past Yorktown, where the American Revolution came to an end, and then into the Chesapeake Bay, and ultimately the great Atlantic Ocean. Washington and Lee is a distinctive place, but like the creek within our midst, we are connected always to something much larger than ourselves and to a past and a future beyond our present moment. Another small thing with large meaning. A few days ago, I met with a couple of hundred high school seniors. They had been accepted to W&L as, brace yourselves, members of the class of 2020. It was our hope that they would now accept us. I asked them to imagine themselves returning to campus for their 50th reunion in the year, brace yourselves again, 2070. I told them that I would soon be meeting with the class of 1966, who would be on campus doing just that, looking back on lives well lived and remembering how their choice of a university shaped who they are today. I wanted those young men and women to think not only about where they will spend the next 4 years, but also about a community they'd been invited to join for the rest of their lives. Meeting with them and being here this evening, I find myself on the cusp of a century of Washington and Lee history, imagining what those students will achieve in the decades to come, and now looking back with you, not imagining achievements, but celebrating them. I've spoken before about one of the defining characteristics of our alma mater, the intergenerational contract that binds us. It goes like this. It is perfectly fine and appropriate for those of us here today to benefit from the sacrifice of those who came before us, provided we sacrifice equally for those still to come. Our inheritance from the past becomes our obligation to the future. That moral contract binds us with the generations who preceded us, the names that are familiar, Washington and Lee, of course, but others of more recent times, the distinguished jurists, John Minor Wisdom and Lewis Powell, who are no longer with us, and those thankfully still very much with us, such as journalist Roger Mudd and public servants John Warner and Linwood Holton, who exemplified our highest values throughout their distinguished careers. It has never been far from my mind that students walking on campus today will meet those same lofty standards. And there is something profoundly moving in knowing that the class of 2020 will be here in 2070 doing exactly what we are doing this evening. It was Edmund Burke, the British Member of Parliament during the time of the American Revolution, who wrote, "Society is a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are dead and those who are to be born." That is true about the institution we call Washington and Lee. It has been given to us in trust, and while it was never more perfect than it was during our time as students, we know deep within us that it gets better each passing day, each generation of students. Another small thing with large meaning. Shortly after I became president, we began to plan the restoration of the colonnade. It was badly needed. The classrooms were terribly outdated. Faculty offices were crumbling around their occupants. Providing the latest technology was a challenge. The cooling system consisted of opening a window. Plumbing and heating were still mostly of the 19th century vintage, and it did not escape our notice that we had recently ended the 20th and entered the 21st. The colonnade needed some serious changes, but it was a National Historic Landmark. It needed protection as well. Our challenge was to preserve the character of a treasured, iconic building, even as we adapted it to the 21st century and beyond. I recall a meeting with the architects and the historic preservation folks who had come to tell us what we could do and what we could not do. I was prepared to take them to school. Some things along the colonnade are historic by any standards, but other things are historic only by W&L standards. The reason for the location of a certain plaque, for example, is something you could know only if you knew the unwritten stories passed on through generations. So my guard was up. We started walking down the colonnade. Keep the worn steps into Payne Hall, I demanded, and don't touch the boot scraper. It stays. The officials and the architects were professionally polite and tolerant. They obviously had done this kind of thing before and dealt with people like me. And they diplomatically assured me they understood. And then they asked me, well, what about the pattern of bricks on the colonnade walk? The what? I said. They explained, as you undoubtedly know, from Payne Hall to Washington Hall, the bricks have a distinctive inlay with a circular spiral pattern. From there to Tucker, the inlays are like stars. The differences between the two reflecting the work of different brickmakers called upon at different times during the construction of the colonnade. We assume you want that historic pattern to remain after the restoration. Well, despite having walked the colonnade more than a few thousand times, I did not know that the pattern of bricks changed. And it wasn't even worth pretending that I did. And with considerable admiration for their knowledge and with a newfound humility with respect to my own, I insisted that those patterns should stay exactly as they are. If you understand our approach to the Colonnade project, you understand the ethos of Washington and Lee University, a constant effort to identify and preserve what has made us so strong in the past, even as we change to prepare for a very different future. The worn steps, the boot scraper, and the brick patterns stay. But if we did not make some changes, our capacity to educate students would deteriorate along with the building's structure. The question was not whether to change, but how and for what reason. Some of you may have heard me talk about one of my favorite novels, The Leopard, by Giuseppe Lambertuzza. The time is the late 1800s in Sicily. Italy is moving painfully from a patriarchal monarchy to a democratic republic. A member of the old guard, the man known as the Leopard, is not taking this very well. His nephew, who has committed to the new order but retains great affection for his uncle, calls him aside and explains sympathetically, not harshly, "Uncle, if you want things to stay the same, there will have to be some changes." If that fictional setting from a long time ago in a setting far from here makes it seem too remote, let me offer a local W&L translation from a more recent time. In 1971, alumnus and legendary dean Frank Gillum, who had retired a few years before, was asked what he would tell alumni if he could gather them together. And this is what he said. "When everything is considered, Washington and Lee is as fine an institution as it was when you were here, even though, thank heavens, it is different in many respects. I see no likelihood of Washington and Lee losing its essential distinction of excellence. I would say that if you were inclined to complain, try to analyze what has happened in education in America and look at where Washington and Lee is today. You have to accept many things which at first glance you probably don't like. Many of you think you are paying the university a tremendous compliment when you say you don't want one thing changed from the way it was when you were here. But, Dean Gillum said, if you had that institution unchanged, most of you would be ashamed of it. I am optimistic about Washington and Lee, and I glory in what it is now as I gloried in it when I first came here. We talk a lot about history and tradition here at W&L, and we should. And we talk about them in tones of reverence, as we should. Universities have been defined as repositories for the accumulated wisdom of the ages. If so, few have had the opportunity to accumulate as much wisdom as we have. For the arc of our history traces the arc of our nations. We were here for the founding and the American Revolution, when the father of our country decided to help education on the western frontier, which is where Liberty Hall was located at the time. In conveying his gift, Washington wrote, to promote literature in the rising empire and to encourage the arts have ever been among the warmest wishes of my heart. And if the donation which the generosity of the legislature of the Commonwealth of Virginia has enabled me to bestow on Liberty Hall, now by your politeness called Washington Academy, is likely to prove a means to accomplishing these ends, it will contribute to the gratification of my desires. We were here in the midst of the Civil War and its painful aftermath when a general came here to this college, our college, to help heal the nation's wounds. He explained his decision this way: I have a self-imposed task which I must accomplish. I have led the young men of the South in battle. I've seen many of them die. I shall devote my remaining energies to training young men to do their duty in life. We are surrounded by history, but that does not mean and cannot mean that we are confined by history. I recall sitting on the Lee House porch last fall with a couple of members of the class of 1958, reminiscing and listening to how one of them say how the loss of conventional dress and Saturday classes was pretty much the death spiral for the university he knew. A minute or two later, he was talking about how incredibly proud he was of what the university had become. The 60s brought an end to the dreadfully named Assimilation Committee and the beginning of the radical curricular innovation called the spring term. By the time the class of 1966 arrived as freshmen, we now call them first years, by the way. Sorry. By the time the class of 1966 arrived as freshmen, the thought of conventional dress and life without spring term would have seemed strange. The 80s brought women to the undergraduate student body. The 90s saw a growth in enrollment in Art Center, a requirement that sophomores live on campus, and the start of the new student commons, seen at the time as a plot to undermine the Greek system. A plot that apparently failed miserably since Greek membership is today the highest it's ever been. The past decade has brought a student body that is more diverse in every way, from geography to race to class, and is also, not incidentally, even more gifted academically. It also brought the Johnson Scholars Program, neighborhoods in the form of on-campus housing for juniors, and yet more innovative curricular innovations in the study of poverty, ethics, entrepreneurship, integrative and quantitative sciences, the environment, and global learning. My point is this: for each of us, there was indeed a moment in time when W&L came together for us. Maybe it happened while finding inspiration in a history or an art course, or after a hard practice with teammates, or walking the colonnade late at night. Those were good moments, perfect moments, and we counted ourselves undeservedly fortunate to be here. And our gratitude leaded into an understandable desire to preserve forever those features that define perfection for us at that precious moment in time. But we must not confuse custom with tradition. That demeans the deep significance of what is genuinely traditional. We no longer have the custom of the assimilation committee, but the tradition of civility endures. We no longer follow the custom of an all-male student body, but the tradition of academic excellence survives because we changed. We no longer follow the recent custom of relegating many of our students to substandard, unsafe, and unaffordable housing farther and farther from campus, because we care about the tradition of fostering a close community where everybody knows each other and cares for each other. Sometimes respect for tradition requires change. Think of the colonnade and how carefully we restored it, preserving its character and changing it at the same time. One last small thing with large meaning. To your left and over my right shoulder is the Charles Willson Peale portrait of George Washington. It is a piece of our nation's history, not just ours. The very first portrait of Washington, it was painted several years after his service to the King of England in the French-Indian War, but still before his service in the Revolution. Every detail has meaning, in keeping with the significance of formal portraits at the time. The uniform, the amulet, the pose, which in the context of the times is meant to convey the bearing of a gentleman, and the background, which calls to mind the ruggedness of the countryside and the remoteness of the frontier battlefield where Washington fought. And note this one particular detail, the papers in his pocket. Washington and Peale did not forget to tuck them in. They are displayed for a reason. They are the orders of the march, meant to signify Washington's sense of duty and obligation. Their intentional prominence in the portrait is an early indication of a virtue that would define Washington's life: self-sacrifice in the service of others and a commitment to something greater than the self. That was a part of the DNA of Washington's character, and I like to think that our connection with Washington made that part of our character, part of our institutional DNA. In this day and age, a commitment to the development of character has become a rare and distinguishing feature of a college. It puts us in an increasingly lonely corner of higher education. We have not abandoned that mission, as many others have, either implicitly or even explicitly. We continue to embrace it. But I can be more precise about what we do here at W&L. In so many ways, through the honor system, through the sense of a community that we create, through the importance we attach to caring for each other, through the cultivation of the virtue of civility, through the lifelong friendships that are developed here, through the type of learning that enables us to have the courage of our convictions alongside the humility to learn from others, through the embrace of history that does indeed surround us, through the sense of giving back that brings many of us here this evening. In these and so many other ways, Washington and Lee helped us understand that a life well lived involves something much deeper than a commitment to the self. During your time here this weekend, and perhaps more importantly, when you return to your homes and communities, appreciate your alma mater as a place of consequence, a place where what we do matters. When those members of the class of 2020 gather in 2070, they will see the Liberty Hall ruins still standing more than 3 centuries old. They will be surrounded by the Blue Ridge and Allegheny Mountains, and they will see the stately and imposing colonnade, thankful that it was so beautifully restored and preserved through the support of devoted alumni. They will also see changes that we cannot even imagine, and they may be grumbling about them. That happens among people who care deeply about a place that has meant so much to them. But I am confident of this: when the alumni gather in 2070, as we are this evening, they will, like us, be reflecting on lives well lived, aware that in important ways W&L shaped who they are. This is our institution's timeless trust, always mindful of our past, but never unmindful of our future. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Putting it mildly, we're really going to miss him. We're going to end with a very pleasant surprise. In a moment, a good friend will make his way to the stage. He is a respected alumnus. He's a member of what Ken and I like to call the greatest generation at Washington and Lee, of course, the 1970s. He has served America in the United States Army. He has helped and led civic and charitable organizations too numerous to mention. He's been a highly successful class agent. He was president of the Alumni Association. He won a Distinguished Alumni Award in 2009, and he is the current president of the Omicron Delta Kappa Foundation. Please welcome Russ Chambliss, class of 1974, for a special presentation.
Good evening. It's great to be with you tonight. It's always good to come home, and being in this place is always special. I am not on the program, as you noted, but this is not unplanned, and you'll understand more in a minute. Ken, would you join me up here, please? I'm here on behalf of the ODK Foundation. I have my colleagues with me. Bill Latour, class of 49. Bill, stand up. Son of one of the founders of ODK. You might say he was born into ODK. And Rob Aliff, class of 91, back there. Rob is our legal counsel and has served ODK well. A moment ago, we witnessed the recognition and the introduction into ODK of about a dozen people. These people had demonstrated all sorts of leadership in all sorts of situations, and they deserve to be in an organization like ODK. And I'm always amazed when I look at the ODK story. As you heard, 102 years ago, 15 students, 15 men, decided we needed that there was a need for an organization that recognized and celebrated leadership. Today, they made the first circle, the Alpha Circle. Today, we have 298 circles, and over 300,000 people have been inducted into ODK. That's quite an amazing story. You don't just get from 1 to 298 or 15 to 300,000 by accident. It takes leadership, and we've been blessed with marvelous leaders throughout the whole 102-year history. Some have excelled more than others, but all have been great. One of those shining stars that we had is standing to my right, Ken Ruscio. Before he was president of Washington and Lee, he was the national president of ODK from 2002 to 2006. Right years? Right years. There you go. I can't tell you all that he did, but in today's board meetings, we still talk about what Ken did during that period. He made a huge impact. After he became president of Washington & Lee, he continued to serve ODK in the best possible sense. Mainly, I think his crowning glory, my favorite anyway, is he was instrumental in bringing ODK back home. I don't know exactly how we let ODK get out of Lexington, Virginia, but they moved the headquarters to Lexington, Kentucky. I think they found that bluegrass wasn't so green. Any rate, with Ken and with the help of a few others, we were able to bring them back home, and they bought the train station and paid for it and burned the mortgage on the 100th anniversary. And Ken was instrumental in making that happen. In recognition of Ken's contribution to both ODK and WNL, members of the Alpha Circle and other donors have established a scholarship and program fund in his honor. The Kenneth P. Ruscio Endowed Fund will provide scholarships for Alpha Circle members to attend graduate and professional schools. It will also provide other resources for the Circle. We're off to a great start. We'd hoped that we could say we had funded one scholarship at this meeting. It's been a quiet campaign. We've overfunded one scholarship, and we're getting close to funding a second, and we haven't really announced it yet. So things are going exceptionally well. I would like to say thank you, Ken. Thank you for your service to WNL, for all that you've done for ODK, especially bringing Mama back home, and for your exemplary service in helping today's campus leaders become tomorrow's community leaders. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Russ, and all of those from ODK. I mean, this was a surprise. This was not part of the plan. We should be at a reception right now. But I am, ODK, those who were just inducted into ODK, as I said before, without much thought, ODK is a national leadership honor society that stands for certain things. And what it stands for bears the imprint of what Washington Lee stands for: service to others and a commitment to something greater than the self. I mean, those words that I talked about before are part of the ODK DNA as much as they are a part of the Washington Lee DNA. So this is very, very meaningful to me because of what ODK has meant to me, as well as what Washington Lee has meant to me. And thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And thank you, Russ. Thanks.
We are adjourned in about 30 seconds. Thank you for being here this weekend again. A marvelous start to the weekend. Thank you, President Ruscio, again. We are delighted to host everyone at the Hotchkiss Alumni House, out the door and up the hill to the right. We like to say we sit on the DMZ. We are the last building next door to VMI. So just keep walking, and if you see the Institute, it's time to stop and go up the steps into the Alumni House. But we're off to a great start. Please let us know how we can help you during the weekend. Go Generals, we're adjourned. Thank you so much.